I recently brought in a new lot of coffee from Hama Cooperative in Ethiopia. I first enjoyed coffee from this cooperative in 2005 when I purchased some that had placed highly in a then new competition and online auction program. The following year, I went to Ethiopia as one of the judges for that competition, where a coffee from Hama Cooperative took the highest score in the competition with one of the most incredible coffees I've had on a cupping table, which also sold for the highest price in the associated auction. Once the competition was over, I was able to travel around the country and visit this and other cooperatives that placed well and learn a little more about who they are and how they work. I'm always thrilled to be able to bring in one of their coffees. As with every coffee I buy, I start with roasting a small batch, pulling several samples during the roast. I'm presently using a Diedrich IR1 lab roaster for this, as this is set up to allow me to do profile development work with less than half as much coffee as I could with my IR12. With this roaster, I have some information that's logged automatically. Most importantly, bean temperature over time. I also have the setting on my fuel control as a number from 0, representing a minimum but not quite fully off fuel setting, to 100, representing my highest fuel setting. I also have airflow control manipulations automatically marked, and as I pulled samples from the batch to cup, I manually made a note of when these were pulled. Bean temperature measurements are something that will vary among roasters, so I'm going to add in a little more context. With the machines that I'm using, coffee will appear green until it reaches a temperature of 300 degrees. This early portion of the roast, in my experience, has the least impact on the final flavor of the coffee as long as we avoid introducing roasting defects. With this coffee, I expect to be roasting batches at between 1/3 and 1/2 capacity, and the roaster has enough power at those loads that I don't need to give this portion of the roast much consideration. At 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the coffee starts to change from green to yellow. At 330, the coffee changes from yellow to brown. At 380 degrees, it's possible to hear the start of first crack, and at 430 the coffee will be entering the second crack. With this batch, I have 10 samples. 2 of these were pulled before the start of second crack. 1 was pulled right at the start of second crack, and the rest were pulled later. My hope with this was that I would have samples that are too light, samples that are too dark, and that I would find what I'm looking for somewhere in the middle. With this coffee, I expect that I'll find what I'm looking for on the earlier half of these samples, something that's either a light roast or on the lighter side of a medium roast, but you never find a good dark roast if you don't look for one. Putting the samples to rest overnight, I cupped these coffees. The fragrance evaluation was most favorable on the first 5 cups. The aroma evaluation had the best results in the first 4 cups. The first cup isn't bad. It has a nice lemon zest flavor, really good flavor intensity. Moving darker, it gets better balance, sweeter, more complex flavor. While the flavor improves through the 3rd cup, the intensity of flavor is reduced. The 4th cup is starting to get a little bland, and by the 5th cup, those lemon notes are just gone. At the 7th cup, I'm starting to taste carbony flavors associated with dark roasts, and by the 8th cup, all I'm tasting is roast, and that just doesn't work for this coffee. It's just a thin, bland coffee with nothing interesting about it. I continue tasting at least the better tasting cups until the coffee is cool. At this point, I'm thinking that I can do better than any of these cups. I really like the intensity that I'm getting on the first two cups, but I also like the sweeter flavor that I'm getting right at the edge of second crack. To get that, I want to change how I'm roasting the coffee and focus on that early range for the next set of cups. Yeah, that's really nice. But I can do better. I went back to the lab roaster, reducing the roasting time from the transition from green to yellow through the end of first crack, and then increasing the time from the end of first crack, focusing on the range of end temperatures where I was getting the best results on the first test batch. With good results at the cupping table, I roasted a test production batch on the IR12. The graph for this batch is much smoother, and that's just because I have much better data acquisition hardware connected to my production roaster. While I don't have fuel setting information on this machine, I do have a second thermocouple for air temperature, and I also have the rate of change of the bean temperature plotted automatically. Those aren't shown here as they aren't very interesting, but they do make it much easier to make appropriate control changes when reproducing this in future batches. Comparing this against the first test batch, we can see that from the start of color change from green to yellow through the color change from yellow to brown, I'm roasting this a little faster. The same in the range from the color change from yellow to brown through the start of first crack, and in the range of first crack through the end. This is starting faster but finishing slower. The end is right on the edge of second crack, where I don't hear that in the roasting drum, but there are a couple pops in the cooling bin. Interestingly, with a slightly longer amount of time before the color change from green to yellow, the total roasting time for this batch compared with time to the same temperature from my first test batch is almost exactly the same, but there is a considerable difference in how these coffees taste. Once the test production batch has had a chance to rest, it's time to taste the coffee in a way that's more representative of how a customer might enjoy the coffee. The end result here is clean, sweet, well-balanced, with a greater intensity of flavor, which is what I intended with that change in how the coffee was roasted. The aroma of the brewed coffee is also fantastic. The lemon characteristic from the first development batch has been replaced with a much more interesting grapefruit taste. Overall, I'm extremely pleased with how this coffee has turned out. This is good.